In May of 1971, family members rushed Bobby Ford to St. Michael's Hospital in Texarkana, Texas. He was in a state of panic, and he was busted up pretty badly. When the doctors asked what happened, he and his family members said that he had been attacked by Bigfoot. Not far from the giant sequoias in the Sierra Nevada foothills of central California is a location in the Tule River Indian Reservation known as Painted Rock. Here, there are numerous depictions of nature etched into the giant boulders. These artistic glimpses into history were created hundreds and possibly even thousands of years ago. Over time, these depictions have been studied, and most of them have been identified as the bear, the eagle, the frog. But one of the depictions stands out. The one pictograph that still puzzles many historians today is of a life-sized, hairy, bipedal creature that the indigenous peoples of the area refer to as Hairy Man. Native American beliefs passed down through generations state that Hairy Man was the first to be able to walk on two legs, and it was he who gave that gift to humankind. Hairy Man was thought to be nocturnal, and he stayed deep in the forests. His intent was to limit contact with humans, forever living in the same world but never being detected. However, over time, humans have caught glimpses of Hairy Man, and now, occasionally, for reasons that are unclear, the evil side of Hairy Man will sometimes emerge and create a peculiar wailing, howling, or whistling sound late at night in an attempt to lure people deep into the woods for various nefarious reasons. In the early 70s, researchers studying Hairy Man noted that Hairy Man had the exact same characteristics as another mysterious creature that's reportedly been seen all over North America. Hairy Man was a tall, intelligent creature that walked upright, and so was Bigfoot. Just about all skeptics today believe that Bigfoot is just a myth, and sightings are nothing more than misunderstood natural phenomenon in nature or hoaxes. Nevertheless, even now in 2024, there are still hundreds of Bigfoot sightings reported every year. In this video, we're going to consider the possibility that a creature such as Bigfoot just might exist. And to do this, we'll take a look at various reports that have come in over the last 500 years in an area of the world known as Miller County, Arkansas, which is about 1,500 miles east of the Tule River Indian Reservation in California. Bigfoot sightings here have been seen since before European colonists arrived. We'll share some of these accounts with you, and then we'll end with an apparent Bigfoot attack on the Ford family. Now, one can say what he or she will about Bigfoot not being real, but that attack on Bobby Ford, at least to Bobby, was real enough to land him in the hospital. Then stay with us for our Fact or Fiction segment. There, I'm going to take just a minute, and I'll give you my thoughts on this whole idea of Bigfoot. And then Amy is going to come on, and she's going to share information on the findings from a professor of anthropology who has studied the Bigfoot phenomenon for years. And what he's discovered just might make some skeptics rethink their positions. So, this story begins deep in the murky swamps of Miller County, Arkansas. What is it about the forest that makes it so eerie? You know, many places in the southeastern United States have seemingly been left behind by the technological advancements of modern society. But perhaps none of them have been left as far behind as the dense wooded areas of Miller County, Arkansas. Here, the never-ending drone of insect sounds permeates the air, and long twisted tree limbs cast eerie dark shadows over the ground, much of it muddy and wet. The areas of the ground that are dry are often covered in heavy tangled shrubbery or knotted roots sticking up out of the thick clay. As night falls, the sounds of snakes slithering and other dangerous creatures can be heard nearby. And then, in the distance, howls echo into the night. Howls that are difficult to tell if they're from wolves, coyotes, or, at least in this part of the world, something else. It is in this forgotten, overgrown land that much of our story takes place. And what story is that exactly? Well, it's the story of monsters, of course. And they've been reported in this untamed area of the world for more than half a millennia. Dating back as early as the 1500s, Native Americans described a creature that stands upright, over 8 foot tall, has intelligence, and somehow disappears into the night. The Caddo tribe used the word Hakatasi, which translates into lost giant. The Cherokee called it Kekle-Kudle, or hairy savage. Other natives have used other words to describe it, but they all have had the same tales of how it would hide in the forest, be spotted, and then disappear. Then, when humans brought writing to the area, sightings of this beast were recorded in the newspaper. On May 9th, 1851, the Arkansas Gazette and the Memphis Inquirer ran a story about 2 hunters who were in the tamer parts of these dense woods. The article told of how these 2 men were startled by an overly large animal that seemed to be trying to catch a calf right in the middle of a herd of cattle. The men reported that they first heard the cattle making sounds of distress. When they looked over, they saw the cattle actively scampering, and right smack dab in the middle of the herd, bent over, was what first looked like a large man wearing a heavy, hairy coat. A second later, this man looked up, and they could instantly tell that it wasn't a man in a coat.
It was an animal, bearing the unmistakable likeness of humanity. He was of gigantic stature, the body being covered with hair and the head with long locks that fairly enveloped the neck and shoulders.
According to the men, the creature stopped for a moment and just stood there, gazing back at them, intelligently, pondering, before finally running off into the woods. Then, just 65 years later, in 1916, a couple of newlyweds who lived not far from the swampy areas of Miller County were returning home in their mule-drawn wagon when suddenly the mules began to bray in distress. Almost immediately, the couple heard this eerie, high-pitched wail, or maybe a whistle. Then they saw it. It was tall, covered in long dark hair, walking upright. It projected the feeling of a man, but it was swinging its arms like an ape. It emerged from the tree line, and it aggressively headed straight for the couple. Before they knew it, it had crossed half the distance toward the wagon. Well, the man was completely unnerved by this, and he fumbled when he reached for his rifle. But still, the beast got closer, and it moved faster. The couple thought they were goners for sure, but then at the very last minute, the man managed to pull the rifle up and fire a single shot in the direction of the beast. It's unclear if the creature was hit because it didn't flinch. It did, however, retreat back into the woods. The couple immediately rushed home and barricaded themselves inside. Later, a group of men searched the area, but nothing was ever found, and the couple never saw the creature again. But just 50 years after that, and only a few miles away, a young man named James Crabtree would have the most terrifying encounter with what appeared to be the exact same creature. In 1965, a 14-year-old boy named James Crabtree, well, to call him a boy really wouldn't be correct. He was 14, yes, but this family, they lived way out at the very edge of these dark woods, and they were economically depressed. A lot was expected from everyone. By the time that James was just 13, he was doing work that was required of most men. By the time he was 14, well, he was hunting and fishing deep inside these woods all by himself, and often overnight. On one particular hunt, he heard the sound of horses running by. From where he was, he couldn't see them, but he did hear them splash into the lake. Just moments later, he heard a very strange sound that he first thought was coming from a dog hollering, crying out in pain. And James thought that, well, maybe it was hung up on one of the many barbed wire fences in the area. The yelping sounded like it was coming from the lake, and James thought that, well, he better go help that dog before it really tangled itself up. About halfway to the lake, however, he could hear the dog's cries much more clearly, and he wasn't at all sure that it actually was a dog. The cries sounded too deep to belong to a dog. They sounded as if they were coming from something much, much larger. So he stopped. He stood real still and he listened. No, it most definitely wasn't a dog. But what was it? He had never heard a sound like that coming from any other animal in the woods before. So he very quietly made his way out into the clearing right in front of the lake. And there, less than 10 meters away, was the strangest animal that he had ever seen. It was standing upright on two legs at the water's edge, facing away from James toward the horses, who themselves were out in the middle of the water. And it was this creature, not a dog, that was making those yelping sounds. As it did so, it waved its arms at the horses, and all of this together made James think that it was angry at them for dashing out into the water. It stood 7 or 8 foot tall, and it was completely covered in reddish-brown hair. It moved kind of like a man, but it wasn't a man, and James kept watching it, puzzled. And then, before he could duck behind a tree, the creature turned around and spotted James. Its face, too, was covered in hair, and only a dark brown nose protruded out of the center. Petrified, James pulled his gun up to his cheek, and he took aim. When he did, the creature stuck its neck forward toward James, and then started sniffing the air. James tightened his grip, but he didn't shoot. He was having a very difficult time understanding exactly what he was looking at. Surely this wasn't a person. But what kind of animal moved like that? What if, somehow, this was some wild, crazy man, maybe deformed, covered in hair? So James hesitated. But then the creature took a step forward, and then another. Finally, James decided that it just wasn't worth it, so he pulled the trigger. He said he aimed straight for the face. Either he missed, or the beast just didn't feel the pain, because it didn't even flinch. It just kept steadily moving toward James. So James shot a couple more times, and then he took off running. When he got home, he was completely panicked, and he told the story to his father. His father grabbed his rifle and went out to the area that James had been, but he didn't find any evidence of the creature. A couple days later, James's father and some neighbors mounted a huge search party with dozens of armed men and hunting dogs. They searched a vast area of the woods, but no one ever spotted the creature or found any of its tracks. They did, however, hear it howling in the distance somewhere in the night. Over the next few days, something very interesting happened. Several other people came out of the woodwork saying that they too had had encounters with this strange creature. But until James had come forward, they were just too embarrassed to say that, they saw some crazy, long-haired beast man in the woods? A newspaper reporter came out and did a story on it all, and more hunting parties went out looking for it. Over the next few years, dozens more people came forward with news stories of how they too saw this beast, and these hunting parties just continued to grow. Now, in this account, no one was ever hurt by this mysterious creature, but the same thing can't be said about the people in our next story. At the end of April 1971, two couples, Charles and Elizabeth Taylor and Donna Patricia Ford, and their children moved into a house on Highway 71 on the north side of Fouke, Arkansas, in Miller County. The house stood right up at the edge of the very dense forest, nestled on three sides by woods. The nearest neighbor lived across the highway and quite a ways down. The two men, Don and Charles, worked long hours, and they wouldn't get home until well after sunset. On the very first night that they were there, the two women heard sounds outside. Then they heard footsteps up on the porch. Well, they stayed quiet and peeked out the curtains. It was dark. They thought that they caught a glimpse of someone on the porch, but they couldn't be sure. After a bit, the stranger, or whatever it was, left the porch and then disappeared into the night. Well, at that point, the girls were completely spooked, and they didn't want to stay in the house any longer. So they gathered the children, and then they made their way across the highway down the road to that neighbor's house. When Don and Charles returned, the girls told them what happened, and the men searched the area, but found nothing. So the girls came back, and everyone just went to sleep. Then, on Friday, April 30th, Don's brother, Bobby Ford, and a cousin, 12-year-old Corky Hill, came to stay the weekend. Early the next morning, Bobby and little Corky woke up to go fishing. They got dressed, gathered their equipment, and headed out, but they never made it to their fishing hole. Along the way, they found a very bizarre footprint. It was fresh, and it looked like it was about 13 inches long. They examined it for a while, and then they rushed back to the house. Now, this had to be almost 7 years since little James Crabtree had had that encounter with that strange creature at the lake, and from that time till now, hundreds of people had come forward stating that they had had encounters with this strange creature, and oftentimes people would later find huge footprints in the area. There were so many of these reports that whatever this was had been labeled the Fouke Monster. So when Bobby and Corky saw the print, they immediately knew what it was. And when they got back to the house, they excitedly told everyone that the Fouke Monster had left a print nearby in the woods. Don, Bobby, and Charles spent the next few hours searching the area for any signs of this supposed creature, the Fouke Monster, but they never found anything. Then, a little after sunset, strange noises, grunts, and soft howlings came from the woods. So the boys went out and had another look around. When they got back, they found that the girls were terrified. The girls said that while the boys were gone, someone or something had been sneaking around just outside the house.
The thing was either awfully smart or there were two of them, because it would lead Don and Charles away from the house, and before they got back, it would already be there.
Shortly after that, while Bobby was in the bathroom, a large hairy hand busted the screen off of its tracks and reached through the window. Bobby immediately jumped up and bolted out of the bathroom. An instant later, he was in the living room, completely panicked, pulling up his pants, and he was shouting that something had just reached through the bathroom window. Well, Don and Charles grabbed their guns and ran outside, but the creature, or whatever it was gone. Now at this point, no one really wanted to stay in the house, but they really had nowhere else to go. So they just all buckled down inside and hoped that the worst of things were over, but they weren't. The worst was yet to come. Just a short while later, while Elizabeth was sitting on the couch, nervously thumbing through a magazine, and Bobby was sitting in a chair next to her, holding a butcher knife, just in case, another hairy hand came through the living room window and reached for Elizabeth.
I saw the curtain moving on the front window and a hand sticking through the window. At first I thought it was a bear's paw, but it didn't look like that. It had heavy hair all over it, and it had claws. I could see its eyes. They looked like coals of fire, real red.
Bobby leaped off of the chair, grabbed Elizabeth, and pulled her to the floor. Immediately, the other two men rushed into the room, and whatever it was that was outside took off. Well, a moment later, all three men were on the porch chasing after it, and they saw the silhouette in the yard heading toward the trees. They fired a couple of shots and thought that they saw it fall, and then headed out to look. As they did, well, the girls realized that they were once again left alone in the house, and they started screaming for the boys to come back. So Don and Charles sent Bobby, and they continued to pursue the creature. Well, just before Bobby got to the house, something attacked him.
I was walking up the steps to the porch when the thing grabbed me. I felt a hairy hand come over my shoulder, and the next thing that I knew, we were on the ground. The only thing that I could think was to get out of there. The thing was breathing really hard, and its eyes were the size of $50 and really red. I finally broke away and I ran around the house through the front door. I don't know where it went.
Bobby was in such a state of panic that he didn't even stop to open the door, and he inadvertently stuck his entire arm through the glass part of the door. Then it shattered, and then the rest of the door opened, and Bobby fell onto the floor inside. Don and Charles heard the scuffle, and they heard Bobby's screams, so they abandoned their chase, and they rushed back to find Bobby unconscious on the floor. He looked pretty busted up, so everyone piled into the car, and as I stated in my open, they took Bobby to St. Michael's Hospital. But along the way, Bobby woke up, and he was still very severely affected by what happened.
He was screaming and trying to kick out the car windows, so Don would knock him back every time he came to.
When they got to the hospital, the doctor asked them what happened. And this is the part of the story that intrigued me the most. Everyone gave the same answer, and the doctor could see that no one was joking. Not just in everyone's somber faces, but also in the very real injuries that Bobby had. So the question that just kept running through my mind as I was putting this report together was, who in that situation would risk looking so crazy as to say that they had been attacked by Bigfoot? Unless, of course, they really had. So, what should we make of this report? Well, the information that we shared came from several different sources, knowledge passed down through time by various Native American tribes, newspaper articles dating back hundreds of years, direct quotes found in police reports, and several eyewitness statements. As interesting as this story is, however, almost all historians, archaeologists, and paleontologists agree that Bigfoot just can't exist. For all of the sightings that come in every year, and they number in the hundreds, no one has ever found a single bone to match an animal described in any of these sightings. The skeptics ask, well, if Bigfoot exists, where are all the bones? Still, it is fascinating at how many people still report seeing Bigfoot today. Personally, I've never seen anything like a Bigfoot, but then again, I haven't spent much time in the woods. Interestingly, a very dear friend of mine, a person that I believe has the highest integrity and someone who hunts deep inside the North Carolina forests, told me that he once had an encounter with Bigfoot. He described his experience, and it sounds fantastical, but I believe that he's telling me the truth. Now, that doesn't mean that I believe in Bigfoot. Amy came across a professor of anthropology who has studied the Bigfoot phenomenon for years. So today you're going to talk about a person in anthropology, is that right?
Yes, Dr. Jeff Meldrum. Now, he is a professor at Idaho State University, and his studies are anthropology and anatomy. I believe he also has a master's in zoology.
Okay.
So his life's work is around studying how primates and humans walk. Basically, he's the bipedalism guru.
Okay.
Okay, and along with studying that, he has studied, of course, thousands and thousands of footprints.
All right.
Okay. He is even able to reconstruct what an animal's foot would look like, or an unknown creature's foot would look like, by what the imprint or footprint looks like.
All right.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
To actually build that from just a footprint.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's looked at, photos, fossils. He's actually been out in the field and looked at a lot of these prints. I read his book. I believe the title is Sasquatch Meets Science.
Cool.
It's so cool. And it's all about his study on thousands of footprints. Okay.
Right.
And
thousands of Bigfoot footprints, or just thousands of footprints?
Thousands of footprints over the years, but hundreds and hundreds of purported Sasquatch footprints, right?
Cool.
And can I read a section from his book? I pulled this out to read because I thought it was just amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So in his book, he says, My research interests revolve around the functional anatomy and evolutionary history of the primate foot as it relates to the otherwise singular human adaptation of walking on 2 feet. So it was the evidence of the Sasquatch footprints that particularly captured my attention. Clearly, something is leaving enormous human-like tracks on the backcountry roads and riverbanks of North America's mountain forests.
Wow. So this guy's got a PhD.
He does.
Yeah.
Yes. And he's written, like I said, a book, also peer-reviewed journal articles.
And so after studying hundreds of these, maybe thousands of these supposed Bigfoot impressions, he is under the belief that there's something going on.
There is something. And he even goes so far to
So I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Could his something be a national hoax?
I don't think so. He would putting his career on the line.
No, not. I'm not saying that he thinks like that he's making a hoax.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, he says that something's going on. Well, could it be that he's just confused? There's like people, like somebody hoaxes. They put something in, they put a print in the ground,
right?
And they send it in,
right?
And then he believes that it's created from an animal, but somebody manufactured it. I mean, could he be? So you're saying he couldn't be duped?
He couldn't. I don't think he could be duped because he has looked at some of the hoaxers, right? Prints before, and he tells exactly like where the foot pressure would be, why that print is a hoax, exactly down to like the skin impression on the photo. So I really believe that I don't think this guy could be hoaxed.
All right.
Right.
So what's the difference between a normal primate and maybe this mysterious creature, the Bigfoot? What's the difference in the print?
Right. So the difference let's just talk about humans, the difference in humans and what he believes to be Sasquatch footprints, basically in layman's terms. Now, anybody that wants to go read the book, I'm going to put the link in the description because the depth that he goes into on these studies is incredible. But basically, human footprint has an arch, and most people walk heel to toe.
Right.
Okay, right. And then you also take the size of the average human foot. Okay.
Yeah.
None of those things are applicable in these anomalous possible Sasquatch footprints that he found. There's no arch. There's no heel to toe movement. The pressure in the earth that this footprint makes is consistent, right? So it's like all of the weight of the print is on one step. Well, humans don't walk like that.
So you're saying that he's saying that these creatures, whatever they are, if they do exist, they're not walking heel to toe.
Right.
They're walking they're planting their feet down, just straight down.
Right. And they're much heavier than a, quote, common normal human. Right. So they sink more deeply.
Right.
He also talks about the skeletal structure, what he believes is a skeletal structure of a Sasquatch, a foot.
He can figure that out from just the print?
From the print.
Wow.
And he says, the toes are much, much longer. They do not match at all with what the structure of a human foot would look like.
So could this doctor be confusing bear prints with the Bigfoot print?
I don't believe so. Now, I learned that bear prints, their inner toe, right, like our big toe is on the inner part of our foot. It's small. It's the smallest toe.
Where ours is the biggest. Okay.
So if he came across prints like that, he would immediately say, well, this is a bear.
These Bigfoot prints are not like that.
No, their largest toe is on the inside, similar to a human's. And also, many times bears, their footprints leave claw marks at the tips, right? Because their claws don't retract like a cat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think he could have been confused by that either.
What about primate prints?
When you look at monkeys, primates, you look at their hands and they have an opposable thumb. Their feet are exactly like that as well. So their footprint, when they do, which they don't walk upright often, but when they do, you can see this thumb sticking out for the inside toe.
Thumb on their foot.
The thumb on their foot, right. Which helps them climb trees.
Right.
So that makes sense. So that's the
these
difference.
Bigfoot prints don't have that.
No, they do not have an opposable.
So they're not like humans,
No.
heel to toe. They're not like bears because of the toe and the claw.
Right.
And they're not like primates because they don't have that. So they're completely unique.
They are unique. And he was able to pick out the patterns, right? So if it was just one anomalous footprint, it's like, well, that was weird. Who knows what it was made? But when you look at hundreds and hundreds of these, you realize, wait, there's a pattern here. And this pattern doesn't fit any animal that we know of today. Right. So I found it extremely interesting. And he's even gone so far as to theorize that, okay, if there are these Sasquatch Bigfoot creatures and they're in certain areas, right? So in certain areas, let's say of a mountain range, that you would see the same footprint, right? Just like if a human was walking on the same path barefoot over and over, you'd see that exact same footprint. And he has found that as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So I have to ask you, like I always do, what did you think about today's report then? So I'm guessing you're leaning toward there's something out there.
I am leaning toward it, but with a caveat, okay? I would love to know where all of these footprints stop, right? Because of the other evidences that we can't find. We can't find, like you mentioned, I think, bones.
Right, exactly.
We haven't found any hair that matches an anomalous creature.
Right.
I'm not talking about the Yeti, but I'm talking about, the Sasquatch. Babies. Why aren't there babies? So I'm wondering, do these creatures walk in between dimensions? So they kind of come in, they do their thing, and they leave, which is why we can't, catch them or anything else. So
we've
that's
hypothesized about the other dimensional side of things before. All right. Well, thanks again.
You're welcome.
Recently, we've received comments from people asking us why we don't do longer reports. Well, right now, it's just Amy and myself, and we barely stay ahead of each week's release. Last week's report, as you know, was a monster, and it actually took us several weeks to put together. This report is shorter, but we are desperately trying to get these reports out on time. This story is just one of hundreds of very well-documented cases of Bigfoot. If you'd like us to research and do another one of the reports on Bigfoot, please let us know in the comments below. If we get enough interest, we'll add it to our list of future reports. This one, especially the part where Bobby got attacked by the monster, reminds me of what happened with Reinhold Messner. In his prime, Reinhold was an extremely tough man, and he's probably one of the toughest that history's ever created. He spent the majority of his life conquering nature and climbing the most treacherous mountains in the world. In the 1980s, he was trekking through the Himalayas, and he got a little off track. He was looking for the Tibetan village of Chagu when he came across a creature that he said walked upright and was so terrifying that it left him shaking. His report is extremely fascinating because he was alone, miles from anyone, when this beast appeared. Later, he shared his story in detail, and we did a complete report on it. If you'd like to see it, it's here.
Hey guys, so buy me a coffee, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey guys, I've said it before. If you want to be Hey guys, I've said it before. If you want to be a knot in our rope, then go to the link somewhere on this page to buy me a coffee and support our channel.
And thank you to those people who are already doing that. We so appreciate you.